All right, Varad, let me just quickly introduce everyone. So we have, these three fabulous people, and they all
Hmm?
are students of UPS. And UPS has this region 6.0, which is their collaboration with different
Hmm?
social groups and different like you know groups who will be doing the social work. So they have collaborated
Okay.
with VSVS Trust, and we have
Hmm?
Akash. He's the civic leadership lead. Then we have Lakshita, who looks after the grassroots advocacy. We have Aryan as well, who looks after the operations and logistics. And they themselves have prepared all the questions. And you have suggested that we can, chronologically just
Hmm?
restructurize all the questions so that we can have
Hmm?
a more better and clear discussion.
Yeah.
So I think they are all set and prepared. And I'll be here in the meeting. I'll be listening to you, and it's going to be an
Okay.
honor. Thank you so much for accepting this invite. And if there'll be
Yeah.
any other like Q&A at the end of the whole discussion, I think
Hmm?
yes, I'm also gonna ask in the end of the discussion.
Hmm?
And yes, you, Akash, Aryan, and Lakshita, you can proceed, and I'll just go on mute and just
Okay.
feel free. Varad is an amazing human being. He's a person whom I know since what, 10 years, right? Almost seven, eight,
Yeah. We
10.
met in FYBA, I think. Yeah. So it's
Of course,
been
yes.
5 years since my master's itself, and then 5 years before that. So definitely, yeah, it's been a decade. Oh my God, I feel old. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
just feel free, and I'll
So
just go on
UPS
mute.
is
Over to you, Varun.
UPS is a college or UPSC you're doing? Hello?
UPS, yes,
No, sir.
it's
Yeah, either of you can go ahead. I don't mind. Yeah,
So
tell let me know.
UPS is a college. It
Hmm.
stands for University for Petroleum and Energy Studies, where
Okay.
first year students we just passed the first year right now. So yeah,
Hmm. Okay. Petroleum and energy studies. Oh God. So what kind of engineering are you all doing? I saw that you're BTech. What kind of engineering?
Computer science engineering.
Okay. Okay. So refineries and all of that stuff, or anything else? Because I am completely clueless about the engineering environment, to be completely frank.
computer science. We have specialization as some computer science. The
Hmm.
refinery and stuff. There is a branch called
Hmm.
I think related to petroleum in UPS,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
we're in CS, computer science.
Okay. Okay. So more on the energy and technology side rather than the petroleum side. Okay. Okay. So how are we going about this? So you had all those questions for me, right? So you will be asking them one by one, and that's how we'll go. Okay. And if you feel like asking me to clarify a point or anything like I have my points. I need my points because otherwise I'll just start rambling. But if I
Yes,
ever
sir.
end up
Lakshita
being
will
like
go ahead.
unclear or anything, then feel free to ask me, interrupt me in the middle, ask me for clarity, ask me about what I mean when I say this or that, right? And yeah, let me know when you're ready to begin.
Yes, sir. Hello everyone. My name is Lakshita. I'm a student, and as a part of our ongoing work and learning experiences, we are here conducting this discussion on men's mental health, an important topic that often doesn't receive enough attention. Like
Hmm?
mental health is an essential part of our overall well-being, yet it is often overlooked when it comes to men. Today, we are here to create awareness around this important topic. I'm grateful to everyone for joining us today and hope this discussion will be meaningful and insightful for all of us. So, let's begin with that. So, first, I would like to ask, sir, like, why do men find it difficult to openly express their emotions and seek help?
Okay. So before I get into the nitty gritty of it all, right? One thing I would like to ask you is that when you say that men find it difficult to express, what do you mean when you say men? How are you differentiating men from women? What do you think is the main difference? Because when we say, "Ki, okay, this is about men's mental health." So tomorrow, if say we make a government subsidy for men's mental health program, how would you define which mental health program is catering to men and which one is not? Who are you including in that definition, and why are you including them in that definition? It's a very basic question, I'm sure, but what are your thoughts? Tell me.
So, like, it's often seen like many men grow up and hearing that they should always be strong, hide their emotions, or deal with their problems on their own, which
Hmm.
these expectations can lead to silently with stress, anxiety, loneliness, and all.
Hmm.
They usually,
But hmm. But do you think it is never possible that a woman might have those kinds of values inculcated as a child as well? Is it
because
entirely all about upbringing, or is there something fundamental that you think is different?
like usually we have grown like hearing all these things.
Hmm.
Mm,
Definitely, we have grown hearing all of these things. So let's get into it. Okay. So when you talk about it from a strictly biological sort of perspective, right? Every human being starts out female, right? When you are developing inside your mother's womb and everything, every human being starts out female. It is only at a certain point in development that a switch is flipped, and then you're like, okay, this fetus is going to develop into a male or it is going to develop into a female, right? And it can sometimes happen that it does not get flipped, right? So, for example, there are intersex people who have a Y chromosome, but their bodies have developed in a stereotypically female fashion, right? We call those intersex people. And so that would not be somebody who would be raised as a male, right? Because even though they have a Y chromosome, they are not going to have the same hormones because that chromosome did not activate in the first place, right? So when you say that, okay, men and women behave in a different way, part of it is because of your biological makeup. Part of it is because of how society differentiates between men and women, right? Now, there are some things that are just biologically different, right? So, for example, if the two sexes have different hormones, right? So we say that, oh, women have estrogen, men have testosterone, and all of that, right? But it is not that only women have estrogen and only men have testosterone, right? Both of those genders have a different ratio of both of those hormones, but we have all of those hormones, right? And yes, I am not somebody who is from a medical background, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. But your hormones do affect your behavior to a certain extent, right? We see a lot of developmental changes that happen because of a certain level of estrogen or testosterone, be it prenatally or be it after your development happens, right? So when you say that, oh, we are talking about men's mental health, you would also have to talk about people who maybe were not considered men when they were born, right? We also have trans people who do exist, and they would also be included in that umbrella because we say that June is Men's Mental Health Month, but it is also Pride Month. So we cannot leave out those trans people out of the discussion. And the reason I bring them up is because their anecdotal experiences and their otherwise empirical experiences also inform us about what is it that makes men and women different from each other, right? Because there are a lot of commonalities, but there are also some differences, right? Hormones are very minute, seemingly invisible things that do influence our behavior, right? So, for example, we talk about estrogen, right? How women have a lot of estrogen compared to men. Now, estrogen is a hormone that a different hormone, which is called oxytocin, selectively binds, right? So when you have, say, oxytocin in your body, then that oxytocin is wandering around in your bloodstream. It comes across an estrogen hormone and there are other hormones, it is going to selectively bind to that estrogen because it is a very, what we can say, chemically compatible hormone for oxytocin, right? And oxytocin is what we call the social hormone. It is called the bonding and maternal hormone as well, right? And oxytocin is the reason why mothers and their babies have such a very strong bond, right? And it makes sense for oxytocin to bind selectively to estrogen because obviously, if mothers are not very strongly bound to their babies, then the entire generation is in a very big dilemma, right? But that also subtly affects the overall social behavior that women display, right? Now, you might remember how in middle school, for example, girls get very much into groupism, right? So there is one group of girls who are like the cool girls. There's another group who are like against that group and all of that, right? In middle school, a lot of things happen in female social circles, which don't necessarily happen in men's social circles, right? Boys' social development works on very different paths even before socialization steps in, right? Even from a very early age, girls are going to be doing pretend play when boys are doing parallel play, right? Or when boys are doing rough and tumble sports. Girls are like, oh, this doll is my baby, or like this doll and that doll had a fight, and then that is why they are going to either sort it out or they're not going to sort it out and all of that. Guys don't do that. You give them a bat and a ball or a truck and they'll be like vroom, 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 all of that, right? So those basic biological impulses do differ. There's no denying the fact that hormones make men and women different from each other. But then hormones are not the be all end all of gender, right? So, for example, if you have followed the news in the past decade or so, you might know about the situation that happened with the Olympic sprinter Duti Chand, right? So people were like administering this hormonal test on her because they're like, oh, we need to make sure that all of these athletes are not engaging in doping or any of those things, right? And what happened with Duti Chand was that they found that, oh, her testosterone levels were too high to be considered female. But she is a woman, right? So is hormones going to be the entire argument for saying that, oh, one person is this gender and another person is that gender, right? Because even within one particular gender, you do have people with different levels of hormones, right? So where do you say, okay, you need to have this certain level of hormones to be considered male or this considered level of hormones to be considered female? Because that becomes a bit of a reductive sort of process, right? So, in addition to just the hormones that we have, we also have to look at socialization, and we also need to talk about the fact that your hormones can be overridden by your brain, right? Your hormones might give you one particular tendency, but that doesn't mean if you put a boy in a group of girls and you expect them to play with each other, that boy is not going to be able to do the pretend play that those girls do, right? If you put a girl in a football team which is full of boys, it doesn't mean that that girl is not going to be able to play football, right? So your brain can and it does override your hormones, and the brain is such a wonderfully and intricately connected thing, right? A connected organ, we could say, to the rest of your body that we even have something that we call a somatic disorder, right? In India specifically, somatic disorders are something which is very common, where if you have some kind of mental health issue, it shows up in your body as well, right? So, for example, you might be facing anxiety about something, and then whenever that thing shows up, you get a headache, you get a stomach ache, you start feeling it in your back, you start feeling it in your bones, right? Somatic disorders are something which is very clinically common in India, right? And so your mind and your body are best thought about as like an integrated feature, right? We should not distinguish between, okay, this is what the mind is, this is what the body is. And we need to think about them cohesively as a whole. And coming to your main point about why men find it difficult to express, right? So there is definitely a certain component that does end up being a bit biological, right? So when I said, okay, women have more estrogen. That is why oxytocin selectively binds to them and they become more social. So when we look at clinical evidence as well as anecdotal evidence from people who have transitioned from, say, female to male, then so those would be trans men. So what we see is that there are some people who say, okay, before I started transitioning, it used to be the case that whenever I was upset, I could get myself worked up, and then I would have a good cry and get it all out of my system, and then I would go on with my life. Right? That is something that this person used to do before they transitioned. But then after they transitioned, after they started testosterone therapy, they said that the tears just wouldn't come, right? So they said that there was some kind of biological block that was preventing them from using the same technique that they used to before they started that hormone replacement therapy, right? And then there are also other people who say that I started feeling dumb after becoming, getting on testosterone, right? And so it is not something that we should generalize, obviously, because every person's body is different. Every person's reactions to hormones are different, right? किसी को नमक ज़्यादा अच्छा लगता है, किसी को नमक कम अच्छा लगता है. Hormones are kind of like that. Your body responds differently depending on who you are. It's not just about, oh, you give this percentage of hormone to one person and that the same percentage to another, and they will respond the same. It is like medicine, right? The same medicine given to two different people can have two different reactions. So it can definitely happen that with a certain amount of testosterone, it becomes a bit difficult for the body to process it. Now, when you talk about the brain specifically, right, and we talk about testosterone, estrogen, and all of that, the brain exclusively, not exclusively, but like predominantly uses estrogen as one of its currencies alongside ATP and all of those other basic cellular currencies, right? And when it comes to male bodies, what happens is that our bodies take testosterone, and testosterone can be transformed into estrogen and used by the brain in that sense, right? But when you talk about a trans man, because they are genetically female, their body does not have the same recipe for translating that excess testosterone into estrogen so that the brain can use it, right? So you also see something about that reflected in cases like dementia and all of that, right? Men are much more likely to get diseases that are neurodegenerative compared to women, right? Because women predominantly function on estrogen, but men predominantly function on testosterone. So when that level goes down, there is less excess testosterone for the brain to transform it into estrogen and use it, right? So that basic hormonal difference does make an impact. I personally do have experiences where like a spike of testosterone was like it made my brain a bit foggy, right? So when you say that, oh, this word is like on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember that word, right? I felt communicatively, what can you say? I felt communicatively restricted in certain sense, right? It does definitely happen. And you even see variations that happen when you have like higher or lower sodium levels and all of that, right? So the brain is a very delicate system, we could say, right? The levels of hormones that you have, they do make a big impact. So there is that part definitely, right? But then hormones are just part of the story, like I said, right? Hormones are providing you the path of least resistance, and that is where your body is naturally going to go. But then you also have your own socialization, you have your own active brain processes. And yeah, it definitely does happen that, okay, the boys are socialized in a different way and girls are socialized in a different way. So if a boy comes to you, a little boy, and the boy is like crying and is like, oh, this thing happened to me on the playground, and this, I had a fight with XYZ, and he said this, he said that, all of that happened, right? Uh, sometimes, yeah. And it does happen when it comes to socialization that we tend to tell boys to deal with, right? When it comes to a girl, it is like, oh, kya hua becha, right? And you encourage a girl to express her emotions. That is something that does happen in pretend play as well, right? And that is where the internal preferences part kicks in, right? So how much of this do we say is just because girls are inherently more social, and how much of this is because, oh, nobody just nobody just taught this boy how to process his emotions, right? Because when a child comes to you and the child is like, oh, this thing is something that I feel bad, do you tell the child to just lean into it because, like, oh, you have to be strong or you have to do this no matter how bad you feel about it? Versus when somebody is like, okay, but why do you not like it, right? Can you tell me what was it about this person, what this person did that made you feel bad, and how can you sort this out with the other person in a way that is very ideal, right? Versus telling somebody, कि, oh, उसने तुम्हें एक मारा, तुमने उसको दो मार के आना चाहिए था, right? And that socialization aspect does make an impact. And one of the questions that I am skipping ahead a little bit, but one of the questions that you sent me in advance was that so a lot of people lean into anger, a lot of people lean into silence, right? And when it comes to talking about your emotions versus getting angry about something or being silent about something, talking about your emotions is something that a lot of men have been socialized to think about as something that is not productive, right? Anger feels productive, right? If you get angry with somebody, you go and hit them, and then they have to talk to you or they have to stop bothering you. That is something that does fix a problem, right? But talking to somebody about why that person's behavior or words made you feel angry does not feel as productive, right? Even though emotionally it might be something that helps in the long run, that is not something that we incentivize little boys to be doing, right? And because they are not really participating as much in the pretend play aspect that we talked about, right? That behavior is not something that is reinforced at a great extent when it comes to women compared to women, right? So that is definitely a factor that plays a role in whether you talk about your feelings or you just respond to that with anger or you lash out at somebody with your silence, right? So that would be sulking kind of behavior, right? कि, oh, तुमने मेरे साथ झगड़ा किया तुम गंदे हो मैं तुमसे बात नहीं करने वाला, right? So that is silence, and that is also productive in a way, right? Because it gets rid of that person from your social circle, and that is an immediate quick fix. That talking about your feelings and trying to sort out what was it that went wrong is ever going to feel, right? And so that immediate dopamine hit that you get from those quick fixes, that is something that we as a society need to stop prioritizing, right? We need to start prioritizing that kind of emotional work with a boy just as we would do with a girl. And that starts from the house, right? It is not a big social problem that you need to fix. That is a problem that you need to fix at an individual household level, right? How is it that a mother or a father or a grandparent responds to a child that comes to them, right? So that is the level where that change needs to start happening. And it can happen as an adult, right? It can definitely happen in a therapy setting. But if it happens at the level of a child, then all of the problems that we deal with when a grown man comes into therapy, and then that is when they need to unlearn old patterns and relearn better, more healthy patterns, that a lot of that work is going to be happening at the household itself, right? And because as a child, there are no pre-established patterns, so to speak, beyond the ones that biology gave you, it is a much easier task, right? So that kind of change needs to happen at a very early age, and this needs to happen from the family itself, right? So whether you are a father, whether you're a mother, whether you have adopted, whether you're an uncle, whether you're an aunt, that is something you should be encouraging a little cousin of yours or a little brother of yours to be doing, right? You need to start preparing them to do that kind of emotional labor from a very early age. Because what is happening in my perspective right now is that we are very well aware of the need for, training girls to be strong or training women to be empowered, right? But when you're empowering women and you're breaking them away from that old traditional system that we talk about, see how women should be submissive and women should be in the house and all of that, if you're training women to break away from that, what happens to the people who are not trained to break away from it, right? So women are not part of that old system anymore, but women are not all of society, right? 50% of society is men. If men are going to be following the same old patterns, then women can't break away even if they want to, right? So it has to be a conversation that involves both people. And just like you train a girl to be stronger, you train a girl to be more assertive, you have to also train a boy to be more emotionally responsive and commit to that emotional labor from a very early age, just the same way that you would ask a girl to be committing to, right? Does that answer your question?
Uh, for sharing your perspective. That's very
Mhm.
important points which you said. So let's move forward. Like you said, there are family expectations, social expectation. What all impact does it happen like on men's mental health?
Mhm. Okay, so about family expectations, right? Now, expectations are something that everybody has from everybody else, right? I expect you to be a civil and sensible person when I meet you in the street, right? If I'm walking down the street, I expect a driver to see that I'm crossing the street and not run me over, right? So, society as a whole is built on those mutual expectations and obligations that we have for each other, right? But when it comes to gender roles, for example, those expectations go a bit differently in the sense that they are very often very entrenched, right? So, for example, even today, with all of the feminism and all of the women empowerment that we have, there are still parents who say कि ओ हम अपने जमाई के घर पे नहीं रहेंगे, हम अपने बेटी के ससुराल का पानी भी नहीं पीते, right? And when that is happening, the counterpoint of that is that they expect all of that caring, all of that labor that you have to go through with an elderly person, right? Now, in my community, we say that being a senior citizen is the same as a second childhood, right? After 60, you age in reverse and you turn back into a child. That is something that we say in my community. So, who is the one who is taking care of you during that second childhood? Is it going to be a son? Is it going to be a daughter-in-law? What do you expect to happen? Right? And for a lot of people, the basic expectation is that हमारा बेटा करेगा, हमारा बेटा एक बहू लाएगा जो हमारे लिए वो सब करेगी, right? And because of that expectation, which has been imbibed in them from a very early age, right? Now, just like when it comes to a daughter, you're raising her कि like, oh, तुम बड़े होके किसी और के घर जाओगी, उधर जाके ये बोलोगी क्या मुझे खाना बनाना नहीं आता, मुझे ये करना नहीं आता, वो करना नहीं आता. They're going to laugh at us, right? So that kind of traditional mindset that is inculcated in a girl to make her, do all the domestic housework and all of the emotional labor that we talked about. A similar kind of inculcation also happens with a boy, right? तुम बड़ा होके कमाओगे, तुम बड़ा होके घर चलाओगे, तुम बड़ा होके हमारे फिक्र करोगे, तुम हमारी टेक केयर करोगे, तुम्हारा कुछ हो गया तो तुम ही करना है, right? And then in today's setup, where a lot of people have just one child or just two children, then that becomes a bit of a pressure, right? So some people lean into it, some people build their life around it, and that may be something that gives you a sense of purpose in life, but that can also be a burden for another person, right? So, for example, if you go to a restaurant, right, and you go to the restaurant, you ask the waiter, ki, oh, give me a menu, give me something, I'm very hungry, I want to order something, right? And then you order something and the menu tells you, oh, sir, ye available nahi hai, or ma'am, ye available nahi hai, ask for something else. Or the waiter just flat out tells you, ki, oh, we don't have any of our cooking stuff in house today, so we are not functioning today. You know that it is not the waiter's fault, right? The waiter is just somebody who is working there. They are just a service person who is going to be dealing with you and serving as a midpoint between you and the kitchen staff and getting you the food and telling them what is it that you want. But you're still going to be upset with that waiter, right? You might even, if you're very hungry, you might say कि oh, इधर रेस्टोरेंट खोल के क्यों बैठे हो अगर तुम्हारे पास खाना ही नहीं है, दरवाजा बंद करके रखने का, right? And this is a very this is a very simple example, we could say, right? It is a very distant example. It is something that most of us would have faced, right? But imagine if you are the waiter, right? and your parents are those customers, right? Your parents are expecting you to do something without which you did not even need to exist, right? That kind of mindset did exist. It does still exist in some circles, right? कि हमने बेटा पैदा क्यों किया, राइट? बेटा पैदा इसलिए किया क्योंकि वो बड़ा होके हमारी देखभाल करेगा, हमारा ख्याल रखेगा, हमारे लिए जो भी करना है और चाहिए नहीं चाहिए वो सब करेगा. And that is a big expectation, right? There are people who rise to the occasion. They will lean into it. They will be like, oh, I have to do this. I have to take whatever job that I get. I have to study and be at the top of my class and, get into the best kind of college, best kind of education, best kind of job so that I can give them everything. And then there are also other people on the flip side who will be like, I didn't ask for this, right? मैंने नहीं बोला था तुमको कि मुझे पैदा करो, मैंने नहीं बोला था कि मुझे पैदा करो कि तुम्हें बुढ़ापे में ये तुम्हारे बुढ़ापे का सहारा बनने के लिए, राइट? And then those people will do things like they'll just go abroad and never come back, right? And then their parents are the ones sitting here and they're like, oh, हमने बच्चों को पढ़ाया, सिखाया, लिखाया, and then वो चले गए, right? And both of those things do exist in society, and that is definitely a burden that people face. And it is something that we need to talk about, right? So we talk about how you know girls should be somebody that a parent thinks about as a potential support, right? Even today, or even in my scenario, so my grandfather got dementia, right? And he was with us and we were like, okay, this seems a bit weird, we should get it checked out, right? And we did get it checked out, and he is in an institution that he can take care of him. But his basic expectation even to this day is that मेरे बेटे ने मेरा करना चाहिए, मैं मेरी बेटी के पास क्यों जाऊँ, मैं मेरे जमाई के पास क्यों जाऊँ, why can't my son take care of me? And his son is somebody who works a corporate job. His daughter-in-law is also somebody who works a corporate job. Neither of them are going to be home 24/7 to be able to give him the kind of care that he needs, right? And the other option is to hire somebody to be there 24/7 in order to look after him. And that has to be a male person because if it's a woman, she is going to be uncomfortable. And if it is a male person, then they have daughters. तो दिन भर पराया मत तीसरा कोई तो घर में रहेगा, फिर हमारी बेटियों का क्या? So that entire issue could have been entirely avoided if he was willing to live with one of his daughters, right? But he's not willing to do that. That is simply not a mindset that he has. And if that mindset does not change, if that mindset is not something that we as a society grow out of, right? So we say that, okay, a woman can do everything that a man can, right? If we do not also say that a man can also do everything that a woman can or a woman should, if both of those genders are not given the freedom to do whatever it is that they need to do rather than what they should do or what they are supposed to do, we are going to be, as a society, something that is going to face plenty of issues in the future, right? So we only need to look at a different country like China or Japan, right? Already they have a very low birth rate. They have a very high population of elderly people who simply have nobody to look after them because they had only one child and that child went abroad or something happened to that child or that child is not financially capable to look after them or anything like that, right? And then all of those expectations, all of that burden falls on one single person, whether that be your son or whether that be your daughter. That is something that is not going to be healthy for that person, right? Because you're just one person. How much burden are you going to take on, whether you're a son or whether you're a daughter, right? So that should be something that we as a society should consider a collective responsibility if पानी उधर तक आ जाए. That is something we will have to do. But first, we will have to start with loosening our expectations about who is supposed to be the primary provider or who is supposed to be the sole breadwinner, right? Because it is not just about a man choosing to be like, okay, ठीक है, if my wife is earning more than me, that is fine. I will stay at home and look after the children, right? Is society going to allow him to do that? Or is society going to be like, oh, ये घर पे बैठता है अपनी बीवी का पैसा खाता है, right? because that is a very real barrier, we could say, right? The social stigma is something that makes a big impact in a collectivist society like ours, right? We do believe that other people's opinions are important, and we try to have a good image in society. We try to save face and all of that. So unless and until at a societal level that change happens, that is going to be something which is very difficult. And that societal change is only going to happen with young people. It is going to happen with people like us who are going to be talking about these issues more openly. It is going to happen with us being more accepting of something that is non-standard, maybe of something like a daughter who is looking after her parents and a husband who is also taking care of her parents, and they are both taking care of each other's parents together rather than being like, yo, ये तुम्हारे पेरेंट्स है, तुम्हारे भाई ने करना चाहिए, और ये तुम्हारे पेरेंट्स है, तो तुम्हारी बहन भी कर सकती है, right? Instead of doing that blame game about who is supposed to be doing something and who is not supposed to be doing something, we should think about what is it that needs to be done, who is it that is in a position to be able to do it, and we should be able to accept that, okay, this is the situation that we as a family are in. This is a situation that we as a community are in. So whoever is able to do it and whoever is willing to do it should be the one doing it. Right? If it is the case that the woman is more educated or the woman has better career prospects, it should not be a big deal for either her husband or her parents or her in-laws or even her neighbors. It is not even her neighbor's business, to be honest, if she is the one that decides to take a more active role in her career and a less active role at the home, while her husband steps in to do the same, right? Pick up the slack that is going to be left over. Because what is currently happening is that we are training girls to be the kind of woman who does it all, right? She's going to do everything. She's going to work outside. She's going to take care of a family. You're expecting her to be a superwoman. But how many real superwomen exist? How many real supermen exist either, right? You can't expect either gender to take up the entirety of the labor that is required of the family, right? In the traditional setup as well, then the men were the ones who were entirely handling all of the outside chores. The women were the ones who were handling everything inside, right? The men didn't have to think about that because they knew, okay, मेरी बीवी कर लेगी, मेरी मम्मी कर लेगी. That kind of trust is something that needs to exist within between the members of a family, and that is basically what we need to work towards building, right? That is the core feature of what we might call our social fabric, right? If every single family is able to trust each other to pick up the slack wherever they are not able to contribute, that is how you get better mental health, not just for men, but also for women, also for children, right? Because it is those children who are later on going to grow up to be men and women themselves, right? And it is in your childhood, as we discussed before, that the roots of your mental health are sown, right? So it doesn't matter if you are a boy or if you're a girl. It doesn't matter if you're a father or if you're a mother. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to give a family a good life. And everybody needs to pull their weight to do that. It is not something that you should think about in a very restricted sort of way. कि, oh, ये मर्दों का काम है, ये औरतों का काम है. Because as long as you think about that, you are also indirectly stuck in the same old system where that thought process emerged. And that old system was the one where people were predominantly relying on agriculture. In a situation where people were predominantly in a large family setup, in a joint family setup. That is not something that a lot of people have the luxury to have today, right? In urban centers, you have 1 BHKs, 2 BHKs. How many people are you going to stuff in that one single house? Eventually, you are going to separate. Eventually, you're going to be doing things on your own. So it starts with the family itself. If you don't raise your boy to be like, oh, पानी दिया हाथ में ऐसे लाके दिया, right? Because where are those men coming from who are, expecting their wives to be doing everything? Where are those women coming from who are expecting their husbands to do things that they have never been trained to do? They are all coming from a setup where we are teaching girls to do everything, but we are not teaching boys to do everything at the same time, right? So It should not be the case that you teach a boy different things and a girl different things. They both have to be taught everything at the same time. Just like in school, they would be taught everything at the same time. You don't say, कि, oh, लड़कियों का maths अच्छा ही होता है, मैं लड़कियों को maths सिखाओ ही मत. The girls are good at languages, so teach her poetry. You don't do that, right? So why do you do that in the household? Why do you expect a boy who is come from school to be like, oh, बच्चा मेरा बेचारा थक गया, बैठा इधर सोना, मैं तुम्हें पानी ला के देती हूँ, मैं तुम्हें खाना ला के देती हूँ. But if the girl is the one who is coming from outside, very tired and everything, अरे ऐसा थक के कैसे चलेगा? कल तुम पराया धन हो, तुम ससुराल जाओगी, थक जाओगी, तुम सासू माँ को ये बोलोगी कि सासू माँ मुझे पानी ला के दो. That that attitude needs to change, right? You need to expect both of them to do pull their own weight, and you also need to give both of them the level of support that they need when they need it, right? If she is tired, baby her. If he is tired, baby him. But if you feel like, okay, this is enough, जरा ज़्यादा ही नखरे चल रहे हैं तुम्हारे, both of them should be expected to do the things on their own, right? दोनों को अपने खुद के कपड़े धोने आने चाहिए. It is not supposed to be the case that just because you're living alone, you're a bachelor, you wear the same shirt for an entire week. Because you're like, oh, कपड़े धोने को टाइम लगता है, सुखाने पड़ते हैं, जगह नहीं है, ये नहीं है, वो नहीं है. Because at the end of the day, you as an adult are going to be a functioning member of society. And if you stink every single day, that is going to have an impact on the kind of experience you have in life, right? So both of you need to be able to do everything. And that kind of social pressure is something that needs to be there, right? You should be able to take care of yourself. You should be able to pull your own weight. अगर कल तुम्हें अकेला रहने का समय आ गया, regardless of whether you are moving to a different city within the same country or if you're moving to a different country altogether, it should not happen that you are living on Maggie. You should at least know how to do dal chawal. You should at least know how to cut some vegetables and have like a salad every once in a while, right? That is something that everybody needs to do. And yeah, that mindset is what needs to change. I think I've talked quite a bit. Let's go to the next question.
Yeah, that really highlights the pressure societal expectations have on one's mental
Hmm.
health. Thank you for sharing. That really helps us understanding this issue much better. So now I'll hand it over to Arun. Now he'll be asking further questions.
Hello, I'm Varad Joshi.
Hi, Aryan.
So my question is, what role does the social media is in influencing man's health, both negative and positively?
Okay. So social media affects men in the same way that it affects women. We just respond to it differently, right? So we hear a lot about girls get body image issues by like, oh, looking at thin women on the internet all day, or like the way that women are depicted in media and everything. How many Instagram reels have you come across of a fitness influence? Can you tell me off the top of your head,
So 90% of the real,
right? And what does that make you feel when you look at all of those people?
I know about
Exactly, right? So it is not just women that are negatively affected, men are also negatively affected. And it's not just about physical appearance, it's not just about body image issues. It is also about other achievements in life, right? So when you're posting something on social media, you're always going to be presenting a very goody goody picture, right? So if you open LinkedIn, everybody is going to be announcing some sort of anniversary, some sort of achievement, and we only show the best parts of ourselves to the world, right? That is something that Indians are particularly prone to, right? You need to show, कि, oh, हमारा कितना अच्छा चल रहा है. We are very successful in life. We have beat Sharma ji ka beta, right? We need to do that, and we keep posting that, right? We keep posting our holidays. We keep posting our work achievement. Keep posting our academic achievements. How many times do we post about the small and simple joys of, say, coming across a cat on the street? How many times do we post about the simple joys about, say, finding a dog and that dog is a good boy and I patted the good boy, right? How many times do you talk about that one pet dog that travels with his owner in the local train and I've seen him twice and I've petted him once, right? So those little joys are potentially much more meaningful to your day-to-day mental health compared to something like, oh, I scored 90% today. Because how many exams do you give in your life? How many dogs do you see every single day? The dogs are going to be more, right? So it is going to be those little things that you post on social media that are going to be affecting other people as well, right? Social media is not just a place where you go to posture. It is not a place where you just go to flex your own muscles or your academic muscles or your economic muscles. It is also a place where you can go to build a connection with the people that you're sharing that content. Right? Now, obviously, if you're somebody who is an influencer, that is a completely different story, right? Then your entire, what can we say, career depends on other people finding your content appealing and following you for that, right? But then most people are not influencers, right? Most people are only posting their content so that their friends and family are going to see it. So, what are the things that you share with your friends and family? Do you only treat your social media the same as your family WhatsApp group where you just share forwards and you share कि oh uh, पंखुड़ी के 92% आ गए भैया उसके इतने परसेंट आ गए उसको आशीर्वाद भेजो और XYZ just died Om Shanti or do you also share the little joys that you experience, right? And those little joys are going to matter much more in the long term than those big achievements. Now, obviously, I'm not expecting you to go to your family WhatsApp group and tell them, oh, I came across a cat today and I did this, and the cat actually stayed. The cat let me touch her, right? That is not something that your uncle, who you barely remember who that uncle is not going to care. But somebody who's following you on social media, that is the person who might care. That is a person who might be having a bad day. And then that little story that you post would give them a bit of joy, right? And that is a responsibility that you have as a social being who exists in society, right? You don't exist just because, oh, these are people that I know. I have an obligation towards them. They're my friends, or maybe they're my colleagues. So I need to be in their good books to get ahead in society. I need to be in their good books to get notes. I need to be in their good books so that I get that promotion. They are also human beings that you need to build a connection with, right? And that human connection that you build with other people, that is going to be the most important part of what you get out of social media, essentially, right? Because I myself do come across all of those influencer reels. I myself do feel like, okay, I should start working out. But I also see a friend of mine posting a photo of a duck, and that duck was waddling around and it was cute. And that sort of charges my social battery a little bit, right? And that is a commitment that I feel that I have made to the people that I follow on social media, and I hope that they make to me as well, right? Because ultimately, the kinds of things that you post are going to be influenced by what you see other people post, right? You're like, oh, this is like too much of a chindi thing to post about, right? You might feel like, oh, this person is always posting those sad shairis. But then, did you ever wonder why that person is posting those sad shairis, right? Do you ever think about why is it that this person is always ranting about this particular topic? Have you ever used that as as a conversation starter to try and get to know that person, to try and reconnect with them after a while, right? How many people from school do you still talk, right? Because in everyday life, in all the rush and tumble and the competition and just struggling to pay the bills and everything, we lose that human connection. And that human connection is what is going to keep us human until we die. And that human connection is also going to make sure that we don't die too soon. Right? So social media can definitely worsen your mental health by showing you the good things that other people have but you don't have, the good things that uh, other people are doing and you feel like you should be doing but you're not doing. Or it can show you the small joys that other people are experiencing. It can show you the little things that other people are trying to express. It can show you the things that they're trying to vent about. Right? You can bond with them over that. You can bond over a shared sorrow. You can bond over a shared joy. Social media is ultimately a tool, just like any other tool. It depends on how you use it and why you use it. Right? There is this FOMO based social media usage. Oh, what are other people up to? I don't want to miss out on what they are doing. I don't want to miss out on achieving the same things that they have achieved. Or there is the connection based, right? And the connection based approach to social media is going to be more helpful in the long term for not just you, but also for other people in your social network, right? Yeah, the because there is also educational content, right? It's not just that people are posting about their achievements or they're posting about their flexes. They are also posting about things they're thinking about, right? Those intellectual type accounts. They can post about politics, yes, but they can also post about social development. They can post about what they felt when they had to, say, admit their mother to a hospital, right? And they were the ones who had to do it. They are the ones in the caretaking role now compared to in the past, where if you're the one who gets sick, your parents are the ones who do everything for you, right? And that is a very important part of growing up, right? And a lot of us who are growing up on the internet, who have grown up with the internet, those are conversations that we will be having on the internet, because it is not that you can call a friend or have a group call and then talk to everybody about it, right? That is just too icky. That is like too much, right? That is too much social connection. But just posting about that, expressing what is it that you felt, even if it is just to people who you feel close enough with to share it with, you don't have to open up to everybody, right? Just put it on your close friends, put it on your favorites, and that can be something that helps you to build those connections. It helps you to develop a strong social network that you may not have already developed, right? Because when we say that, okay, men are more likely to suffer from mental health issues compared to women, right? The reason women have that added resilience is because women talk about everything, right? So I am somebody who is a bit of a homebody, right? So if you ask me to come out for a hike and everything, I'll be say, nahi jana hai hike pe, I'll sleep. But because I spend so much time at home, I see what goes on in the house. I see my mother having those 1 hour gossip sessions with her friends, and she's talking about every single thing under the sun. I don't see my father doing the same thing. I don't see my grandfather doing the same thing with anybody except my mother, right? That man used to come to our house and he would talk and talk and talk for hours on end. And he would not do that in any other setting, right? So, are you the kind of person who people feel comfortable enough to open up to? Are you the kind of person who makes the space for people to feel safe enough to open up? Social media can be something that is used for that, right? Social media can be something to share ideas, it can be something to share feelings, it can be something to talk about an experience that touched you. It can be something to talk about an experience that you had for the first time, but maybe other people in your social circle may have already had. It could be something that they can help you to deal with in a way that makes sense to you in a much more relatable way than it would have if you go to your mother and ask her, like, Mummy, आप हमारी उम्र की थी तब आपने इसके बारे में क्या किया था, या फिर पापा आप हमारी उम्र की थे तब आपने इसके बारे में क्या किया था. Because their context, their generation, their entire environment was very different, right? So their advice might not necessarily always feel relatable. Maybe you don't have that kind of relationship with them. Maybe you don't have somebody in your family who you can talk to about that with, right? Not everybody has a mother or a father at home. So your friends are going to be your community in that scenario, right? And that is partly one of the reasons why I feel people get pulled into what we call the manosphere. right? The red pill people, the incels, and all of that. We use a lot of pejoratives to talk about those people, but essentially, what are those people getting over there in addition to just conspiracy theories or anti women content? They are getting a sense of connection, right? So, why are they going to that community on the internet? Okay, I think we're all back.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what were we talking about? Yes, the nanosphere, the red pill incel bros, right? So, why do they go to those communities? Is it just because they are angry at something? Is it just because they are, believing that, oh, the government is doing this thing, the government is doing that thing? Is it just because they feel passionately about those causes? Or is it because in that particular, uh, what can we say, in that particular bubble of social media, they are finding something that they didn't find in real life? Right? Are they finding a sense of community? Are they finding a sense of connection that they don't get from their real life friends? Right? Something that they don't get from their friends who will be like, oh, kya bak raha hai be tu? Right? So, are we opening our social zone to include those kinds of people? Right? Because I get it. You are completely at liberty to choose who you want to associate with and who you don't want to associate with, right? Some people are just plain annoying and you would rather not interact with them. That is completely fine. But then, how do you communicate that to the other person? Do you communicate that by making them feel bad about themselves? Or do you communicate that by trying to be gentle about letting them know that maybe we just have very different preferences? Right? And even if you do have very different preferences, as long as you feel, okay, this is a person who is a friend, this is somebody that I knew in school, this is somebody that I care about, how would you express that to the other person? Right? We need to be thinking carefully about how we, choose to behave with our friends, with our colleagues, with our brothers or cousins, or maybe that one weirdo who got into conspiracy theories and we haven't talked to him since school, or we haven't talked to him after he left college. Right? If you feel, if you find the opportunity, if you feel the need to reach out, if you see something that is weird, reach out, right? Hey, we haven't talked in a while, but I saw this thing you posted and I was curious. What made you feel that? What made you say that? Right? If you have the bandwidth, of course, right? And a little, a little niceness goes a long way, right? A little bit of care goes a long way, right? And it's not that you're doing this just because you want to convert them to what is the right way of thinking, or because you want to, tell them or bring them back into the fold of respectable society or anything like that, right? If you go into that conversation trying to change their mind, it is not going to go anywhere, right? So that little bit of connection, right? Okay, you're a bit weird, you're a bit kooky, but you're a friend, right? And a friend is somebody that I want to stay connected with. If that is the only thought in your mind that you have when you reach out to that person, that should be enough, right? It should be enough. It is not always enough. Life is not an ideal place. Reality is not something that is going to, bend over and give you everything that you want with open arms. But the least that we can do is make an effort, right? And let the pieces fall where they may. As they say, "Ma phale shu kadachana." You should feel like it is your responsibility to build that connection and maintain that connection. And that is when life gets a little bit better for everybody. I'm not saying it's going to be 100% better. It's not going to be like 2x, 3x, 10x gains in your happiness, but it's going to be a little bit at a time, right? And your behavior is going to inspire other people to behave in the same way, right? And essentially, that is what you want to do. You want to set a new norm because the old norm does not necessarily work anymore, right? Our old patterns of behavior, what we call as our traditional patriarchal society or whatever other word you want to call it, those patterns of behavior evolved over hundreds and thousands of years back when society was very different. Within the past decade, we have seen a sea of change. Within the simple 90s to 2000s generation, we have seen so many things come and go. We have seen so many things change. Why does anybody think that the same patterns of behavior that helped us to survive and to help us thrive and flourish 100 years ago are going to be applicable today? Right? There are some things that will definitely be applicable. Your sense of community, maybe your sense of religion, maybe your sense of spirituality, maybe your sense of faith. Those things can give people something that uh, drives them. It is not something that is up to any individual to decide for any other person. Right? You might believe in this, I might believe in that, but you both have your own beliefs, you both have your own idea system, and as long as you have made the commitment to have this person in your life, you should be able to accept them, as long as they are not actively going against something that you care about, right? And if you both commit to having each other in each other's life, whether as a friend, whether as a partner, whether as a colleague, whether as just a neighbor, right? That is something that is going to do a lot more for your mental health than anything else, right? And social media can help you to do that. Yeah. Let's go to the next question. Yeah, Yati, your mic is off.
So it was really very insightful. I mean, I was able to like understand that where I can, act differently, where I should have, acted, where, I can just improvise my approach. So after your insight, I'm like way more clear. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, that insight did not come cheap. I was an absolute troll when I was younger, so I know what it feels like on the other end to be like, oh, just having debates on social media. But the reason I can tell you that is because I know having those debates did not get me anywhere with anybody, right? Because at the end of the day, people believe what they want to believe, and they believe the things that they believe because of their own reasons. Whatever their reasons are, you don't know that, right? You can't just assume and expect to be correct. Because
Correct.
even though there are broad patterns, even though there are broad trends, you're like, oh, in general, men are taller than women. In general, women are. Does any random woman that you pick from a crowd have to be more nurturing than any other random man that you pick from the crowd? Right? What if one woman is cool and baby and the other person is, I don't know, who is the sensitive man you think of? I don't know, whatever. Right? Because cool and baby is definitely less nurturing than most other men, right? At least in my experience. Because it
Yes.
is not the fact that men are not emotional. Men are definitely emotional. We do feel things very deeply. It is just on the expression part that we differ, right? Women will talk things out, women will express it in a very explicit sort of way. But in my experience, with a lot of people that I know, and even with myself personally, if I need to tell you about this thing, should I be expressing it to you in the first place? Right? A lot of the times it feels like, oh, this is just something you should get. Men are very non-verbal in my experience that way. But on the other hand, women are very, very explicit. कि तुमने मुझे बताते नहीं हो तब तक मुझे समझेगा नहीं, right? And in
True.
different scenarios, it works
Yes.
differently. Yeah. In romantic relationships, women are definitely the ones be like, oh, तुम्हें समझता कैसे नहीं? But in a non-romantic context, it is the men who are the ones who are more non-verbal, right? So
Hmm.
your friend is not going to reach out to you and be like, "Hey, bro, तुम्हारे marks कम आए क्या exam में? चलता है, bro." He is not going to do that. He's just going to hug you. He's going to ask you if you want to play football. He's going to help you to get into a different mindset. Right?
Hmm.
It is an entirely non-verbal kind of communication that is happening, but that is a kind of communication. Communication does not have to be words. It can be action. It can be the little things that somebody does for you. Right? And you need to be open to all kinds of messages from people, right? Whether those messages are
Yes.
explicitly spoken out loud or whether they are messages that people give you through their behavior, right?
Yes. So, I would also like to, add. this very thing that as a woman I have this tendency to ask for reassurance, and as a woman I
Hmm.
also feel very shameless when I'm asking for reassurance. I'll
Yeah.
tell my brother, see, if you respect me, just tell me that you respect me, and I would seek
Hmm.
some sort of reassurance. So that is something which I observe, this pattern is there in women.
Hmm.
We are definitely too vocal about our
Yeah.
feelings, and yes, men tend to hide, or men tend to just communicate with the non-verbal means. That's something which I totally agree with. And then there's this another thing which I also observed in my like past 2 years of experience when I joined Instagram. I realized that as as someone who would just want to share the life updates, I am trying to post the content which fits my domain, like maybe which fits
Hmm.
my uh, craft. But then there are
Hmm.
people, like for an example, you just rightly mentioned that if you see something and if you find that one post objectionable, then what you did from your end to actually communicate with that person. For an example, I have like XYZ friend of mine, and
Hmm.
he or she may have posted with a cigarette, but I am a
Hmm.
non-smoker. So did I actually just like that photo, or I tried to initiate any conversation? So that initiation is something also which helps us to build a
Hmm.
bond, right? It's not about the
Right.
likes. It's not only about the cool thing. You're just posting out
Hmm.
in order to appear like
Hmm.
swag, appear like a swagger. But
Hmm.
yes, at times we just tend to overlook the initiation part, कि हम
Hmm.
कोई फोटो में किसी का देख तो लिया, पर उसके बाद हमने
Hmm.
थोड़ी सी भी मतलब जरूरत नहीं की कि हम पूछें उससे कि मतलब अरे ये कहाँ का था, कब हुआ, ये क्यों तुमने
Hmm.
वो किया, हम कैसे उससे मतलब इनिशिएट कर रहे हैं, वो भी बहुत मायने रखता है।
Hmm.
अभी हाल ही के
Correct.
कुछ साल में मुझे ये भी पता चला है कि कई बार लोग मतलब गैम्बलिंग में फंस जाते हैं, पोकर में फंस जाते हैं। देयर आर
Hmm.
सो मेनी थिंग्स, दे आर पोस्टिंग कि अरे हम तो कसिनो गए थे, लेकिन आपने उनका पोस्ट देखा, आपने सोचा अच्छा ये तो वो वाले जोन में चला गया है, पर आपने उससे बात करने के लिए कोई वो नहीं किया, कोई स्टेप नहीं उठाया। तो वो चीज मुझे लगता
Correct.
है कि
Hmm.
एज अ पर्सन, एज अ ह्यूमन बीइंग मैं भी वो करूंगी कि मैं हमें आना
Hmm.
चाहिए हाउ टू स्ट्राइक अ कॉन्वर्जेशन, हाउ टू इनिशिएट इट,
Hmm.
और उतना
Yeah.
ओपननेस हमें दूसरे लोगों के लिए भी रखना चाहिए। तो वो चीज है। एक एक बहुत अच्छा
Exactly.
इंसिडेंट है जो मैं आर्यन और लक्षिता और आकर्ष के साथ शेयर करना चाहूंगी इस पॉइंट पे, कि आई विविडली रिमेम्बर वरद, बिकॉज यू हैव सीन माय जर्नी थोड़ा मतलब। तो
Yeah.
आई रिमेम्बर आई यूज्ड टू प्ले कराटे। हाँ, तो
Hmm.
मैं कराटे खेलती थी, एंड एक बार मेरे जो सेंसाई है, सो सेंसाई क्या होता है,
Hmm.
लाइक बहुत अपर पोजीशन होल्ड करते हैं, बहुत अथॉरिटेटिव होते हैं क्योंकि उन्होंने आपको ट्रेन किया है, राइट? तो
Hmm.
एज अ कराटे स्टूडेंट मेरे दिमाग में था कि हाँ, मुझे सेंसाई को खुश करना है, जो सेंसाई करेंगे उनकी मतलब आज्ञा का पालन करना है। तो मैंने जो है सोच लिया कि मुझे मेकअप करना ही नहीं चाहिए क्योंकि सेंसाई को पसंद नहीं है।
Hmm.
तो मैंने 2 साल कराटे खेलने के बाद एक बार अपने स्टेटस पे थोड़ा मेकअप पोत के ऐसे लगा दिया, और मेरे सेंसाई
Hmm.
ने बोला कि अरे ये क्या कर रही हो तुम, मतलब ऐसे मतलब कराटे खेलने वाली लड़कियां मेकअप थोड़ी करती हैं। एंड वरिद वाज
Hmm.
द पर्सन जिन्होंने मतलब वो स्टेटस देखने के बाद मुझसे बोला कि अरे तुम कराटे भी खेल सकती हो, कभी कभी मन करे तो मेकअप भी कर सकती हो। यू डू नॉट हैव टू
Hmm.
लूज योर फेमिनिटी इन ऑर्डर टू लुक
Hmm.
स्ट्रॉन्ग। आपको अपनी स्त्री तत्व को ऐसे मार देने की जरूरत नहीं है। आप एक स्त्री भी हो
Hmm.
सकती हो, अपनी फेमिनिटी को भी ऑनर कर सकती हो और स्ट्रॉन्ग रह सकती हो। सो मतलब कितने मतलब शायद 100 लोगों ने देखा होगा स्टेटस, बट वरद वाज द ओनली पर्सन जिसने मतलब वो इनिशिएट किया। तो मुझे काफी ये सारा मेमोरीज भी है, एंड देन दिस perspective helped me to keep that in mind. So yes, thank you. Over to Aryan. Yes, go ahead please.
So my next question is, if you could change one thing about how society is viewing foreign gender, what would it be?
Sorry. The last part.
Could change one about where the society views mental health, what would be?
Man. Of a man. So the first thing that I would like to change is that why are you restricting it to the mental health of a man? It is the mental health of a person, right? तुम आदमी हो, औरत हो, whatever, but everybody has their own mental health, right? As long as we keep making that distinction, ki, oh, this is a men's mental health problem, this is a women's mental health problem, What we do is that we restrict the conversation to people who are interested in men's mental health, right? So if you are somebody who thinks like, oh, this is not something that concerns me, then you're not going to be involved in that, right? So similarly, if you say, oh, this is a women's issue, where are you inviting the men to contribute to it, right? Just like when you say this is a men's issue, are you inviting the women to contribute to it as well, right? Because 50% of society, any society, given any rough estimate, is going to be male and 50% is going to be female, right? As taking a very broad, simplistic perspective. Both of us are part of a society. So why do we want to say, oh, this is a men's mental health issue and this is a women's mental health issue, or this is a children's mental health issue, this is an adult mental health issue? It is all the same because we are all part of the same society, and everybody can have insights that are going to help the other person, right? And that kind of conversation can feel scary, right? Because we are somebody as a society who are very attached to our identity, right? पैदा होते हो तब से तुम किसी के बेटे होते हो, बेटी होती हो, किसी के जमाई होते हो, किसी के बहू बन जाते हो, you belong to this particular caste, you belong to this particular community, you belong to this particular religion, so you feel like, oh, दूसरों का मैं कुछ बोल नहीं सकता, दूसरों का मैं कुछ बोल नहीं सकती. But then, as long as you keep restricting yourself to, okay, this is something that I know about and this is what I can talk about, does that mean that you should not listen to other people talking about experiences? Does that mean that you, as a human being, have nothing in common with somebody who does not tick all the same boxes that you do, right? And as Yati said, when I reached out to her and told her, oh, why do you have to stop doing makeup if you're doing karate, right? I would not have had that courage to reach out to her and say something like that if I hadn't already been a troll on the internet before, right? Uh, Being a conversationalist is not something that comes to you naturally. Building a conversation, building a connection with people is also something that you need to practice for. It is something that you learn, you get better at with age, right? So if you see somebody who's posting a photo of themselves smoking, if you don't like smoking, you can be like, oh, तुमने smoking चालू किया. You used to be such a good girl. You used to be such a good boy. ये क्या है? That is an approach that you can take. I told you to connect with people. That is definitely an approach that somebody can take because of what I said. But is that going to be helpful? That is something you're only going to figure out by trial and error. And that trial and error is important. And that is going to help you to figure out where the boundaries lie. Where is it that you need to work on your assumptions about people, your assumptions about the world, about where somebody is coming from. And that is when you have the opportunity to introspect and think, is this something that will get the reaction that I wanted to have? Is this something that is going to keep that person connected to me? Or is this something that is going to break the bond that we have? Right? Should I instead say something like, oh, आज बहुत stress हो रहा है क्या काम पे? Because a lot of people get into addiction because they want a way to distract themselves from whatever it is that they feel stressed about, right? Whether it is smoking, whether it is drinking, whether it is anything else, a lot of addictions are a way for you to distract your mind from whatever it is that you're stressed out about. You are essentially ignoring a bigger problem. And unless you fix that bigger problem, the addiction is not going to go away, right? Unless you fix whatever bigger problem exists in society that is causing your mental health issue, your problem is not going to go away. Your mental health issue is not going to go away, right? That is part of the reason why, even though, as Yati said, oh, I'm somebody who's like very nice to talk to, people get a lot of clarity and all of that, I did not choose to go down counseling, right? So I am not somebody who is a mental health counselor. I did industrial and organizational psychology because I felt that it was a more important thing to try and fix the system that we are in rather than just put a band-aid on the symptom. At the end of the day, if your family is the reason for your poor mental health, if your friend circle or your work life is the reason for your bad mental health, then just treating you is not going to fix anything. I need to treat your entire environment. I need to change the environment that you're in, or I need to give you the strength to change that environment that you're in. One of those two things has to happen. It can't be like you're going to a doctor because you have like a pain in your stomach and the doctor gives you a medicine and the pain in your stomach goes away. Right? Mental health is not something like that. It is something, it is like going to the gym. Right? You go to the gym, you develop the strength to deal with whatever it is that you deal with. Right? Now, most people don't go to the gym. Right? The strongest people I know are not the gym bros. It is the people who are doing labor every day in the house, right? If you take any random gym bro on a steroid cycle and you take any random auntie who lives on a farm and she works on the farm every single day and you give them a coconut and you ask them to break it open, that auntie is going to be able to break that coconut open in a much better way than that gym. Why? Because that gym bro has never done it. He doesn't know the technique, and the auntie might actually be better at figuring out how to tackle that problem than he is going to be. Because it's not just a matter of strength, it's not just a matter of resilience, it is also a matter of the patterns of behavior that you have adopted, right? And if you're stuck in a pattern of behavior, that is because your brain is a lazy organ that goes for the path of least resistance, right? So we talked about hormones at the very beginning of the session, right? Oh, this is something that your hormones drive you towards. That is the path of least resistance. That is where your body and your mind are naturally going to drive you. And even the patterns of behavior that have been established as a child, right? So what do you do when you're upset? Do you cry about it? Do you go and sulk in a corner about it? Do you talk to someone about it? Do you try to fix the problem on your own because you should be able to do this on your own? I should not be relying on other people. If those are established patterns that you have, then those patterns are the things that need to change, right? And those patterns are not going to change unless you have the kind of self awareness that lets you see, okay, wait, this is something that is causing that problem, right? Unless you recognize that this is a problem, you're not going to change, right? Unless you recognize, okay, this particular mindset that I have, कि, oh, मैं मेरी बहू के घर मेरी जमाई के घर पे नहीं रहूंगा या फिर मैं मेरी बहू से यही एक्सपेक्टेशन रखूंगा कि this is how a son or daughter-in-law is supposed to behave or how a son-in-law is supposed to behave. Unless you break through that pattern, you are not going to get what you want because those people are going to behave what they think is right, right? You are not the one who raised those people. You are not the one who has grown up in the same environment as those people, right? Every person comes from their own background. Every person has their own brain. Every person has their own upbringing. They are going to behave according to that. So if you keep making expectations from other people about, oh, this is how you should be behaving, or this is how X should be behaving because you have this particular trait or you don't have this particular trait, that is something that is going to box you in and that is also going to box them in because you are going to treat them with that identity at the forefront of your mind, right? This is how a man should be, this is how a woman should be. And if they are not like that, that is going to throw you for a toss. That is also going to throw them for a toss. And that is going to mess up any hope of communication that you might have had with that person. Right? So those expectations, those stereotypes that you have, those are the things that you need to break. Those patterns of behavior are something that you need to understand and you need to figure out where those patterns came from. Right? That is what therapy is all about. Right? Now, in the past, it is not that therapists did not exist, right? In the past, it used to happen that you used to go to some sadhu baba, right? You used to go to an elder in your family or an elder in your village, and they would be sorting out your problems for you. The difference is that not every person is skilled at the same thing, right? Maybe that village elder is respected because they have the wisdom to handle everybody's problems. But maybe it could also be the case that oh, they're just the oldest person around, so everybody's going to them, and it is this expectation that this person is going to solve our problem, right? And that can be something that is a burden for them as well, right? Just because they are older, just because they have seen more in life, does not mean that they are going to automatically have all the answers for you. Right? That is an expectation that may be unfair to them as well. Right? If you are experiencing something at work and you ask your grandmother about it, can you expect her to give you the answer if she has been a stay-at-home mother her entire life? Right? She can definitely help you to figure out, okay, is this something that might be bothering the other person, or is this something that might be bothering the other person? But she's not going to be able to tell you what that particular corporate environment that you're dealing with is like, right? She is not going to be able to tell you what the barriers in that specific environment or that specific role that the person has are going to impose upon them, right? So when we talk about men's mental health, uh, it has to be something that does not restrict itself to men just because oh मर्दों के प्रॉब्लम सिर्फ मर्दों को ही समझने वाले हैं. To some extent that is true, but to some extent you also have to go beyond that, right? So for example, there are some things that a woman might not be comfortable sharing with me because I'm a man. There are some things that I might not be open to sharing with a woman because she is a woman, right? So if you can build that level of comfort with a person, nothing like it. But if you can't, that is when it becomes a men's issue, right? Because then you definitely need a man for that man to talk to in order to be able to open up. You definitely need a woman for that woman to talk to for her to be able to open up, right? And as long as we are going in that siloed perspective, like, oh, men can't understand women's problems, women can't understand men's problems, boys and girls can't be friends, there has to be something that is going on between them. As long as we have those stereotypes, it is going to be a difficult issue to solve, right? So we need to start looking at each other as people in the first place. And after we see each other as people, then all of our other identities into place, right? After I am a person, then I am somebody's son. Then I am somebody's elder brother. Then I am somebody's maybe teacher or colleague or asset or whatever, right? I have to look at the other person as a person, and only then can I put myself in their shoes, right? Then it doesn't matter whether they are a man or a woman. If I'm seeing them as a person first and foremost, then I can ask them, okay, wait, this is not something that would bother me. Why does it bother you? Right? I'm not assuming that this is something that bothers the other person because they are so and so identity. Right? I'm not assuming कि oh ये तो लड़की है उसको ऐसा ही लगेगा और ये तो लड़का है उसको ऐसा ही लगेगा. Right? It is when I break through that barrier that I can actually connect with somebody, and that is when you can deal with uh, mental health problems with everybody, right? Because mental health is going to be the same for anybody. Nobody wants to feel like they're useless. Nobody wants to feel like they're worthless. Everybody has the same desire to be seen. They have the same desire to be seen as a good person, as somebody that you want to connect to, right? If you feel like okay इसको तो मेरे साथ relationship चाहिए ही नहीं, this person is always fighting with me, this person is always criticizing me, you're not going to have a relationship regardless of whether you're a man or a woman or the same gender or another gender. It's not going to happen, right? So first and foremost, when you think about men's mental health, you should look at it as a human issue rather than as a men's issue. You should see it as an issue for this particular category of people. You are going to give people who don't subscribe to that category or people who feel like they don't want anything to do with that category a free pass, right? Because
Right.
I am not going to say that there are no people who are contributing to men's health issues because they are not men. Sometimes the woman is the problem. Sometimes the man is the problem. Sometimes both of them are the problem. Sometimes nobody is the problem. It is just the system, right? But until and unless you start looking beyond those identities and thinking about a person as a person, that you can actually truly try to fix mental health issues. Because we do have a lot of systematic divisions in our country, right? We have divisions along the lines of gender, we have divisions along the lines of class, we have division along the lines of religion, we have division in caste. We have so many different divisions. If you say that today we are talking about men's mental health, Tomorrow you will say we are talking about Muslim men's mental health. We're talking about Hindu men's mental health. We're talking about Dalit Hindu men's mental health. Right? You can make as many categories as you want, but at the end of the day, you're still talking about people, right? And when you make it a conversation about people, that is something that everybody can contribute to, right? And when everybody can contribute to that conversation, the probability of getting a viable solution increases, right? Because the more people you have, the more ideas you have. Not all of those ideas are going to be valuable. Not all those ideas are going to be useful, right? Useful would be a better word than valuable, right? Because you have to treat every idea as valuable if you are going to get people to open up in the first place, right? If they feel like, oh, you don't want my opinion, you don't think my community's ideas are valuable, you're not going to give your idea, right? You're not going to give your opinion. If you are part of the problem, then your ideas are definitely more valuable than anything, right? Because your thought processes are affecting your behavior, and your behavior is affecting other people, right? So it is something that we as a society need to work towards, not just half of society. And the other half is just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for men to get dealt with their problems, so then we can have something productive, right? It is not that men are just waiting for women to get done with their makeup and their dress so that they can go out and have fun, right? It is not that only one side is the problem. Anybody can be the problem, right? Yeah, Yati, you had something to say.
Yes, I just realized that we have as a society created a calendar. Like there will be no
Mm-hmm.
shave November, to oppose or to stand against rape, है ना? And then we have this Pride Month and June as a Pride Month. We have Environment Day as well. Though every day needs to be treated like Mother's Day, Environment Day, Heart Day, this and that. But as a society, I think this calendar somehow just helps us to initiate talks, maybe. I understand and I completely agree with what you said that men's mental health shouldn't be labeled as men's mental health. If I'm talking to a man, if I'll continuously make him feel that, oh, तुम आदमी हो और तुम्हारा मानसिक स्वास्थ्य इस प्रकार से बिखर रहा है, टूट रहे हो तुम, तो शायद वो नहीं खुल पाएगा. तो वो चीज शायद मुझे लगता है बहुत जरूरी है कि हम ये जो हमने लेबल्स बना के रखे हैं कि मेन वुमेन या आप किसी जेंडर पर्टिकुलर से आते हो या कोई अलग कम्युनिटी से किसी अलग रिलीजन से आते हो, ये सारे लेबल्स को मुझे हटाना पड़ेगा अगर मुझे मेंटल हेल्थ को मतलब हाईलाइट करना है. तो आई गॉट दिस आंसर बिकॉज ऑफ योर इनसाइट. And I think this calendar somehow has helped us to get you on this call. अगर ये जून मंथ नहीं होता तो मे बी शायद हम लोग बात नहीं कर रहे होते इस पे. So I think yeah, it's just like we have created certain platforms, but I think we need to look beyond and then stop labeling things, which is the first step of healing and helping. So yes, we can move to next question. Thank you so much.
So my next question is, what are the big barriers that prevent people from seeking emotional mental health, and how can we reduce?
Okay, so Yati has also told me that you guys have been working on reviewing the various mental health services that are available in your area and everything like that, right? So you should also be aware of the statistic of how many psychologists and psychiatrists and mental health professionals in general we have in the country as a whole compared to the amount of population, right? The number of doctors that we have is also too little. The number of teachers that we have is also too little. We have very few people in the profession, right? Whether it is mental health or whether it is teaching or whether it is medicine. So that is definitely one big barrier. Because we have so few professionals, another thing that shows up is access, right? If you are somebody who's having a mental health episode in some rural hamlet somewhere, you're not going to have a psychiatrist for miles around, right? If you're somebody who has a mental health episode in a very urban city, you might have a psychiatrist around, you might have a psychologist around, but then how accessible are those people, right? So, like Jupiter Hospital, Fortis Hospital, all of those big hospitals have their big commercial signboards and everything. But we don't have a commercial signboard for, oh, this is a mental health hospital, right? Because everybody will avoid that area if you build that signboard there and say, oh, this is where you have a psychiatrist, this is where you have a psychologist, right? Because we still have all of that stigma around mental health. Ki like, oh, ये तो पागल है, इसे तो psychologist के पास जाना पड़ता है, right? Because we have that stigma, that is one reason. When it comes to access, another reason is that mental health is something that is treated as a very urban sort of problem, right? So it is treated as something that, oh, हमारे गांव में तो किसी को डिप्रेशन नहीं होता, हाँ, हम छोटे थे हमारे जमाने में तो किसी को डिप्रेशन नहीं होता था, ये आजकल के बच्चों का है, ये शहर के लोगों का है. There they don't have religion, they don't have community, that is why this is happening to them. But it's not like these things did not happen before, right? बोलते थे पहले जमाने में कि इसको भूत बाधा हो गई, right? बोलते थे कि इसमें देवी आती है, इसको ये होता है, इसको वो होता है. We have a lot of conditions which are labeled as spiritual, even though they are technically a mental health condition. Right? Now, I'm not denying that there are definitely some people who might have some kind of connection to the divine. I am not some other sant who can be like, oh, Bhagwan hai, Bhagwan nahi hai. I cannot give that answer. It might be true, it might not be true. It is definitely true that in India we do have a lot of psychosomatic issues, right? So to give you an example, you might want to watch the Anya Malhotra movie Pataka, right? So in Pataka, they have this story of two sisters who end up having uh, about their entire life basically. They're very close as children. Then they grow apart. Then they have a fight and all of that. And they have given a very good depiction of what is a psychosomatic disorder, right? So would you mind a spoiler? Might have a spoiler. So whoever doesn't like spoilers, skip ahead in the recording, whatever. But what happens in the movie is that because Tanya Malhotra's character and her sister have a fight, Tanya Malhotra loses her eyesight. She becomes blind. And they figure out that she's not actually blind. So when they ask her to sit on a certain chair, she always finds that chair and sits in it, even though she's supposed to be blind, even though she's saying, "Ki, okay, I don't see anything." Right? Even if they ask her to walk along a straight line and put something, an obstacle in her path, she still manages to step over that obstacle, even though she says she's blind. Right? So she's not actually blind. What is happening is that she is very depressed about not having that connection with her sister that she used to have, and her body is expressing that stress as blindness, right? And because these kinds of issues do happen in India, this is something that does happen with a lot of Indian people. That is why so many people feel that, oh, mental health issues are just something that you can get rid of by praying or by going to some sadhu baba, right? Because if that is a psychosomatic issue, then that is something that religion and all of the cultural symbolism and all of the emotionally relevant symbols can help with, right? If somebody tells you कि oh तुम्हें भगवान ने श्राप तुम्हें श्राप लग गया है because you did this bad thing, and then if you correct this तुम ये उपाय कर लो तुम्हारा अच्छा हो जाएगा. And if it is a psychosomatic issue, it is going to get better, right? Even if it is actually God, it is also going to get better. But if it is not God, if it is a psychosomatic issue, that will go away because of what that Sadhu Baba tells you to do, right? And a lot of people, because of this, have the idea that, oh, mental health issues are the result of sin, or mental health issues are something that are related to a person's morality, right? कि, oh, तुमने पाप किया इसलिए तुम्हारा बच्चा पागल हो गया, right? That is something that people do believe. And if it is a psychosomatic issue, in the truest sense of the word, it does work. Going to a religious place, going to a sadhu baba, it is going to help. But if it is something biological, if it is something that your environment is causing, then just smearing some angara on your forehead is not going to fix the problem, right? Because if your problem is that your family is going to have constant fights, that is not something that is going to go away by chadhavafying some kind of uh, prasad at some point, right? Your family needs to work on those issues to get through them, right? if you have some kind of medicine that is helping you to deal with a particular issue, you can't just take it, oh, abhi ye issue band ho gaya, dawai band kar do. That dawai is the reason why that issue is not happening anymore, right? That is why you have to keep taking that medicine, because depending on what is the source of your mental health issue, the solution is going to be different, right? If the problem is your home life, you need to fix your home life. If the problem is somewhere in your biology, you need a medical intervention. If the problem is somewhere in your work environment, if the problem is somewhere inside you, right? If it feels like, oh, this is something that I am struggling with and I can't talk to anybody about it, you need to talk to somebody about it, right? So those are definitely very strong barriers that we face, right? I personally know about cases where somebody doing uh, was working with a clinical professional and they were getting treatment for depression and they had meds and everything, and their family is like, this is not this is because तुम्हारी कुंडली में ये है, तो ये भगवान पे जाके फिर पास जाके ये चढ़ाओ तुम्हारा ठीक हो जाएगा. And then they actually stopped that person's medication and they made him do that ritual. And because the medication is a chemical, right? It is going to stay circulating in your system for a certain time. And for a few days, it was okay. And then a week later, a month later, I'm not exactly sure, that person drank phenyl and that was it. So those kinds of things do happen even after you have that, right? Even after you do get help, if your family is going to believe that, oh, this is not something that a doctor can fix, that is going to be a barrier. That is going to be something that we as a society need to have a conversation about. This is something that psychologists need to have a conversation about, right? We need to be enlightening the public about all of these things. And I do have a lot of colleagues who are doing that. There are plenty of counselors and therapists who are posting about it on social media and everything. But then at the end of the day, that is somebody who is in the mental health field that is talking about it, right? So then that becomes a bit of a suspicious kind of thing. Like, oh, तुम तो दुकान खोल के बैठे हो, तुम तो थेरेपी का दुकान खोल के बैठे हो, ऑब्वियसली यू गोइंग टू से कि थेरेपिस्ट के पास जाना चाहिए, बाकी कुछ काम करने से होगा नहीं. So that is also something that people who have faced mental health issues, who have faced their struggles, or who know somebody that has gone through their struggle, that is something that they also need to contribute towards if they feel like, okay, this is something that society needs to be aware of, right? Because if somebody who is selling the thing is telling you the benefits of the thing, you're going to take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, अगर तुम वॉशिंग मशीन बेच रहे हो तो तुम मुझे बताने वाले हो ये मशीन के इतने फीचर्स है, इसमें ये मोड है, तुम इसमें ये डिटर्जेंट डालो अच्छा हो जाएगा. You're going to have some amount of doubt in that process itself, because essentially you are going to suspect commercial motivation. So then that is why civil society also has to be involved. That is why I said yes to Yati, even though I'm not a counselor, right? I cannot give you directly the kind of things that a counselor would be able to tell you. And I'm sure you do have other people on the panel as well who are going to be talking, who may be counselors, so they would be able to tell you, uh, give you a better idea about some of the more technical stuff than I can. But this is a conversation that civil society also needs to be having. And then there's also the matter of culture, right? Because culture is something that we all contribute to, right? Like I said, we as a society are a very divided, right? We think that, oh, this person is an elder, so they have to be treated in this particular way. This person is younger, so then they have to listen to everything that I say, right? We are a very hierarchical, authoritarian society. That itself can lead to a lot of problems, right? कि ओ मम्मी ने बोला तुम्हें करना चाहिए तो मुझे करना ही पड़ेगा, right? That aspect of society is something that is not always helpful. The casteism, the racism, the sexism, the classism, everything, all of those things are something that we have. That is also something that is going to be a barrier. And then there is also the fact that the same issues also show up in environments that are supposedly free from all of that, right? So when you are in a work environment or in a professional environment, right, you have all of those codes like, oh, this is a gender discrimination free workplace, or this is a religious discrimination free workplace, or an employer is not supposed to discriminate against you on the basis of gender and everything. There are different kinds of processes at work, right? Now, as a in corporate India refugee, I can say that there are a lot of things that go on in workplaces which are systematically promoting certain kinds of behavior that are not good for anyone, right? So there are things like if you open LinkedIn, you'll see it very clearly. Oh, this is something that I've achieved. This is something that my colleague was doing wrong, and I helped them fix it. There is a lot of me, 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 me. There's a lot of narcissism that we have in our society, in our formal work culture, and that does exacerbate mental health issues because at the end of the day, if your boss is going to be somebody who does not treat you as a human being, who is just going to treat you as like a cog in a machine that has to follow orders, that is going to cause problems for you in the long run, right? And in that scenario, just asking a counselor to show up once a week and dealing with employee grievances and all of that, that is not going to work. You need to work on your work culture. You need to work on your ethos, right? And that work culture needs to be open to change, right? So I have a classmate who was doing an internship in the Air Force. They were doing an internship in the Army. And there they actually had people who had a lot of family problems that were affecting their work life. That was why they were sent to a therapist. And there, if they tried to involve the family, they were like, तुम तो आर्मी वाले नहीं हो तो हमें क्यों बता रहे हो कि हमारी बहन की वजह से आर्मी में क्या प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है, right? So even in an institution like the army, which we see that okay, this is one of the most merit-based institutions that we have, they still have that perspective. कि army वाला है, ये army वाला नहीं है. So if you are going to open up to a mental health therapist in a military environment, if you're a soldier, if you're a colleague or whatever, and you're expecting to open up to somebody who is within that system, how many years of training would that therapist need? How many therapists do we actually have who are also going to be able to pass the army exam to be a member of the army and also a therapist? Right? Because we do have army doctors, right? There are people who have studied medicine and they also pass the army fitness test and everything. How many people do we have who meet that criteria, right? So you're just restricting the amount of help that people are able to have access to, right? Because of your stereotypical mindset. You're like, oh, if somebody who is not a part of this institution is going to ask me about a problem inside the institution, nothing that they know about is going to help them understand the problem, right? So this brings me back to that dividing people, right? Oh, if you are not part of the system, you can't understand the system. But you can look at it from the outside and tell people an outsider perspective. And then you can take that insider perspective and try to see if there is any kind of alignment, right? Where is it that the inside perspective and the outside perspective does not align? Where is it that an outsider thinks that this is a bad thing that is going on that we have just normalized, right? And where is it that we are doing something that the outsider does not think is correct, but is necessary for our functioning, right? So those kinds of conversations do need to happen. You need to systematically review the system that we are working in because that system is going to have a big impact on the choices that people think they have. Right? At any given moment, you have infinite choices. Right? Right now, if I want, I can drop everything. I can go to the jungle and I can live in the jungle eating fruit. That is something that everybody has the opportunity to do. But we don't think we can do that. Why don't we think we can do that? Even though at the drop of a hat, in the past, people used to take sanya. Why do we feel like we can't do that anymore? Why did people, the majority of people in the past, also feel like they couldn't do that? There are always going to be many, many choices that you have. And a lot of the barriers that we face are going to be about mindset, are going to be about culture. And culture only changes when people decide it has to change, right? Culture is made by people, culture is changed by people as well. So the people are the ones who have to take a step towards it. Because just one group of society working towards it is not going to have an impact. Because there will always be another group that is opposed to them, and they're like, oh, you just want this, that is why you're asking us to do that. Right? That level of trust needs to grow, and that only grows when you start cutting through those barriers that divide us. Right? It only grows when you start cutting through things like gender, caste, class, religion, all of that. Right? So those are all the barriers. And I don't want to make it seem like a big problem. I don't want to make it feel like an impossible problem because it is a very simple problem. You just need to look at another person as a person, right? And you need to be willing to be seen as a person at the same time. You should not be somebody who is like, oh, ये तो बच्चा है, ये मेरे से ऐसे बात कर रहा है, तमीज़ी कर रहा है मेरे साथ. You should treat me in a certain way because I am so and so. You need to go past that, and only then can you expect other people to be treating you as a person free of all those labels, right? So that is a mindset that I believe every single individual needs to inculcate, and that is something that we as a society should be promoting. I should stop rambling now. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for saying so. I'd like to ask Akshat to continue his question.
Hello, sir. I am Akash.
Sure.
Akash. Uh, my question is, what are some of the early warning signs that a man may be struggling with mental health issues?
So there are some very common warning signs, whether you're a man or a woman, right? So people start withdrawing from society. So somebody who maybe used to go out with their friends every once in a while, they stop doing that. Somebody who used to be very excited about certain things, right? So if somebody has a favorite food that they usually like, that brightens their day, somebody stops responding to that. Somebody likes भिंडी की sabzi, and then you make भिंडी की sabzi, and they're like, oh, भिंडी की है, ठीक है. You don't get that emotional reaction, right? So that is a sign that maybe you should have a conversation about something, right? So those kinds of little things, and a proper mental health professional like a counselor, right? I am definitely a mental health professional as an organizational psychologist, but I'm not somebody who is well versed in all of the signs because a counselor is more in touch with all of that literature. I look at things more from a systematic perspective and talk about prevention rather than cure, right? My approach is entirely about prevention. That is something you must have realized from this entire conversation we've had. But to me, one of the biggest signs that somebody is struggling with something is when they feel like they don't have a choice, right? Whenever you tell them, okay, this is a problem that they are facing, and okay, but then why can't you do this? They're like, ऐसा थोड़ी होता है, ऐसा थोड़ी कर सकते हैं हम, right? The moment you see that kind of mental block, that is a sign that this person might end up struggling with something in the future, right? Because a lot of depression and frustration that the depression is a symptom of is related to all of those mental blocks that we have. It is related to all of those cultural and systematic barriers that we see in front of us that we feel we cannot overcome, right? So why is it that you feel you cannot deal with your boss? Why is it that you feel you cannot talk to your wife? Why is it that you feel out of touch with your parents or with your children? What is this one barrier that you think is there that is preventing you from doing the thing that you should be doing? Right? That kind of conversation has to be open. It has to also be analytical, right? Because your emotions are the symptoms, right? The emotions that you feel, oh, ये हो ही नहीं सकता, क्यों हो नहीं सकता? What is it that you feel is difficult for this particular task? Do you think that the other person is just stubborn? Do you think that this is not how things are generally done? And that is why people are not going to be open to it, right? Those are the conversations that are inspired when you see somebody say, oh, I don't have any choice. This is the only option that I have, or there is no other way out. Because when somebody says that there is no other way out, it can also mean something very bad, right? So whenever you feel like somebody does not have choices, they feel restricted in the decisions that they can make. That is one of the biggest problems. That is one of the biggest symptoms that I would say is going to indicate to you that this is an issue that is not necessarily something that needs to be cured with medicine. This is not something that needs to be dealt with by putting them in a mental institution or something like that. This is something that needs to be cured by changing their environment. This is something that needs to be cured by treating them with a little bit of grace. This is something that needs to be cured by giving them a bit more leeway. Okay? So choices and availability of those choices. That is something that I would focus on whenever I am faced with an issue, be like, oh, is this person somebody who needs mental health help, right? And then obviously there are all the usual symptoms, right? They don't enjoy the things they usually do. They are sleepy all the time. Right? Being sleepy all the time is a big indicator of depression. And in general, they just withdraw. Right? It is like a fire that is going out. Right? What is a fire like? The fire is very active. It is very vibrant. It's something that you can't bear to look at. Right? Somebody who is like the sun, and today they are looking like a burning ember. Right? Like मुझे हुए दिखते हैं. Right? Language is very useful when it comes to figuring out symptoms because a lot of people in the past have given us a very rich vocabulary to describe a lot of symptoms of depression. Like बुझे बुझे से लगते हैं, तन्हा तन्हा से लगते हैं, सुन सुन से लगते हैं, right? All of those words, they are not just poetry. They are also a symptom. They are also the vibe that you're getting from that person. And that is going to tell you, okay, there is something wrong over here. Right? And beyond those, to me, it is the feeling that you don't have choices. That is, to me, the biggest part that I would say is a mental health issue because if you feel you don't have choices, it won't necessarily show up on a clinical test. Right? It won't necessarily be diagnosed as clinical depression. But the moment you feel like you don't have choices, that is the moment when things start going downhill. So that would be the one sign that I would recommend people to look out for if you want to prevent problems from happening in the first place, right? Because fixing it after it goes wrong, there are plenty of people who can help you with that, right? There are mental health professionals uh, who are offering advice, who are offering therapy. And again, you should do your research about what kind of professionals are out there, right? Because I've also seen mental health professionals who post gym selfies on their professional formal Instagram and they say female clients only. And I don't know what to think about that. I'm not going to comment on that. Yeah. So definitely reach out to people, do your research about which professional you're reaching out to. Different people respond better to different therapies. Some people respond to REBT. REBT is something that I naturally gravitate towards. Changing my perspective of the situation is something that helps me. But other people are more emotional. Some people do benefit from Freudian psychoanalysis. No matter how much of a joke he might be on the internet, Freud is still relevant for a lot of people's mental health. Then Jung is also relevant for a lot of people. There are many different approaches: dialectical therapy, narrative therapy. There are approaches that are biology based, right? Those are the people who are going to give you medicine. And in India specifically, we have a distinction between psychiatrists who can give you medicine. So they have a medical background. They have done science in the 11th and 12th. And there are psychologists who don't come from a medical background. We come from a philosophical and psychological background. That would be what I come from, right? And both of those perspectives have to go hand in hand. We don't have an education system that is allowing us to mix those things. The new education Hey, are you back? Wait a while. Oh, I guess we're all back. So where was I? Yes. Now, in the Indian setup, we have two different kinds of mental health professionals. We have psychologists and we have psychiatrists or psychotherapists, right? Now, when you say that somebody is a psychiatrist, that is somebody who has a medical background. They did science in 11th and 12th, and then they took medicine after their 12th for their graduation, and then they specialized in neurology or something like that. That is somebody who's a psychiatrist. They are allowed to prescribe medicine. They are the kind of person who you would go to if whatever mental health issue you have is something that is based in your biology, right? It is something that is based in something that is physically wrong with your body or physically wrong with your brain. A psychologist, on the other hand, is not somebody who comes from a medical background. In India, our education system does not allow us to mix those two things. Abroad, it does happen that somebody who comes from that pure psychology, philosophical background that Jung or uh, Freud came from, to be able to later on be able to prescribe medicine. They have special programs that allow those people to get the authorization and the education to be able to prescribe medicine. Our system does not have that yet, right? We have an RCI body, right? The central body that registers psychologists and psychotherapists. And the RCI is going to give you a registration that allows you to practice mental health in the country. That is something you definitely want to check out whenever you reach out to a professional. Are they registered with the RCI or not? But if it's just counseling, you can reach out to somebody, right, who maybe does not have a RCI registration. But always do your homework, right? If it is somebody who is going to prescribe you medicines, or if it is somebody who is going to be very, you know, be very authoritarian with you, feel like, oh, no, no, this is the right thing, you definitely should check if they have an RCI registration, because there are a lot of people who, because psychology is not something that requires a medical degree, there are a lot of half-baked people who are going to give you bad advice that is not going to help you at all. There are half-baked people who are going to take advantage of somebody who is in a vulnerable position. Right? That does happen. I'm not going to say that does not happen. There are people who will offer things like conversion therapy just because they want to get the money from the parents of some closeted teenager, and they will mint money. There are people who do that. We know that. And the problem is that our medical system and our entire educational system is not optimized for mental health. So, you as an individual, when you are struggling, that is a very big challenge to overcome, right? So, if you know somebody who is struggling, try to do that research for them, possible, right? Now, a lot of people will watch this video, I'm assuming, right? So this should be something that is common knowledge. There is a distinction between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and people should be aware of who is doing what, and people should be aware of the fact that when it comes to a mental health issue, just like with a doctor, you get a second opinion. Oh, is this actually my kidney or is this my liver? You should also be open to a second opinion when it comes to mental health, because somebody who comes from a medical perspective is going to try to look at it as a medical problem. Someone who comes from a philosophical perspective is going to try to look at it as a non medical problem. Both of those perspectives are valid, but what is the specific issue that you are struggling with is something that you would need to figure out on a case by case basis, right? Some people's problems are environmental, some people's problems are psychological. Some people's problems are about their own personalities or about their family or about their genetics. Maybe some people just have a genetic predisposition for a certain thing that can be combated with a medicine. What is your specific problem? I don't know, sitting on the side of the screen or without even meeting a person, right? So that is why you need to have the awareness that any mental health issue is going to need two or three opinions at least, because even if it is something that a counseling based approach can fix, even within counseling there are multiple approaches and not everybody finds every approach palatable. When you are in a therapy situation, not everybody is going to gel with their therapist, right? If your therapist just rubs you wrong, that is not going to help you in your journey, right? You will need to find somebody else who you gel with better. And a good therapist will tell you that, right? A good therapist will not try to force you to continue with them just because they are getting your money, right? A good therapist should be able to tell you, okay, my approach does not seem to be working with you. I am going to recommend you somebody else who might be able to help you better. That is the level of professionalism you should be having in this field, because every single person that you're dealing with, every single client that a psychologist deals with, is going to be in a very vulnerable position and they are trusting them to help them find their way out of it. So that is definitely the level of professionalism that you as a client should be looking for. And you as somebody who is maybe a loved one, maybe somebody who is trying to support somebody who is going through mental health issue, who is trying to get through therapy, that is something you as somebody who is related to them should help them realize, right? If this approach is not working for you, is this therapist trying to just get your money and not actually helping you? You, as a loved one, as somebody who is in their life, who is their well wisher, should be trying to connect with them and tell them about if they're not aware of it, right? And you should be able to give them the emotional strength to break that connection, right? Because a therapy relationship can often become a lot like a parent-child relationship. It can often become like a guru-shishya relationship, and then it becomes hard to break them, right? If you feel that somebody that you know is stuck in an abusive therapy situation, you as somebody who cares for them should be helping them to get out of that, right? Because as I said, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes an entire society to build the kind of environment where everybody can flourish, right? And as human beings, we have a responsibility towards each other. If we did not believe we have that responsibility towards each other, even traffic rules would be very difficult to implement. I don't care who lives or dies as long as I get to my destination quickly as possible. I'm going to drive through the road at breakneck speed, no matter who gets run over by my car. You need to have that obligation towards other people. That is what is going to help you to build a society, and that is what is going to be your responsibility as a human being after you have listened to my lecture for this, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hours. How long have we been going? I think 2 hours already. Are there any other questions?
No, sir. No further questions. You answered all the questions that we had in mind, even those that we thought of asking you. Thanks a lot for giving us your insight on the mental health issues. And yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Akash.
Thank you, Varad. Thank you. Yes, I just have one question because you mentioned
Hmm?
about the organizational setup. You are working in the organizational setup as a counselor. So, do you have anything specific when you are, dealing with an organization? Because I am also working at the moment with an organization wherein people have,
Hmm?
uh, more space to come up, show up, and speak up. In large
Hmm?
organizations, I think people can really like decode the communication methods or identify the issues
Hmm?
in
Hmm?
an early stage. So any
Hmm?
one or two like tips you would have understood by being in this organizational counseling setup and you would wish to share?
Okay. So when it comes to an organization, right? So I'm going to talk briefly about what organizational psychology actually is, because a lot of people think organizational psychology is about dealing with unions, right? So when I told my grandfather that, okay, this is the branch of psychology that I'm specializing in, so this man has worked in a bank for his entire life, right? He started as like a manager, and then he went all the way to like he he I don't know, CFO level, CEO level. I'm not sure, but he was at the board level, and that is where he retired, right? So this was a man who spent his entire life in one single bank. And the question that he asked me is that, okay, so does that mean you deal with labor unions? Does that mean you deal with employee grievances? Right? That is the perspective a lot of people have towards organizational psychology. And that is also the perspective that a lot of human resource organizations or human resource systems in an organization have, right? What is human resources? It is about
Correct.
getting new people, dealing with whatever, getting them familiar with the organization, dealing with grievances, and then dealing with people leaving the organization. That is all you do, right? But organizational psychology is not entirely about that, right? Hiring, firing, talent management, all of that is definitely something that we learn as organizational psychologists. But the way that the Indian corporate society structure is working, right? As I said, I'm a corporate refugee. I have seen how things work in a couple of organizations. Some were MNCs, some were very well-known companies. And what I've seen is that a lot of the time, the authoritarianism that we have in Indian society at large, the hierarchical structure that we have, बड़ों का सुनना है, छोटों ने गलत जवाब उल्टा जवाब नहीं देना है. That same approach is something that we bring to the workplace, and that results in HR becoming more like a document processing organization, right? HR is just getting new people, processing all of their documentation, bringing them to the job, and then leaving it to whatever is going to happen, and then processing them on the way out. Right? It becomes a very bureaucratic process. But when you talk about organizational psychology at large, it is about an organizational commitment that you make towards two things. One is towards your employees, and second is towards your operational efficiency. How do you make your organization most effective? That is something you can do by doing Six Sigma and all of that. You can optimize a process, but you can also optimize the way that you have structured your entire organization. Do people in your company feel, uh, do people feel safe enough to go up to their boss and tell them, hey, this is something that happened in this particular project, and I think this is not something that should have happened. We should have done it in a different way. Are you, as an organization, committing to allowing HR to talk about those kinds of things? Or is HR just a bureaucratic machine that is going to collect complaints, going to forward those complaints, and leaving the people to sort themselves out? Right? That is how it works in a lot of scenarios, and HR can do much more than that. But that is all HR does, right? And that is why you have all of those corporate memes about, oh, HR ने क्या किया, रंगोली निकाला. HR ने क्या किया, छुट्टी अप्रूव किया. HR ने क्या किया, ये किया, वो किया. And HR is so much more than that, but we as a corporate culture are not embracing that, because that needs to come from a top-down manner. Even if the employees want that, it is not going to happen unless the management allows that to happen. That is why the current setup where I am in is a startup. We are a very small team of like 5 or 6 people. We work in education. We are dealing with uh, students who are trying to appear for exams for going abroad, or for exams even for prestigious colleges within the country, right? And that is what I'm dealing with, because my talent management profile can also help me to deal with exams like the SAT and the GRE and the GMAT. So those exams are standardized tests where they are specifically trying to test one particular skill set. They are trying to test one particular ability. They are not just trying to eliminate as many people from the pool of entrants, we can say, from the pool of people who are applying to your college as possible, because that is the approach that a lot of Indian colleges have, right? You have 100 seats and you have 500 people applying for those 100 seats. That is a very real situation in our country, right? Especially at the more prestigious colleges that you can say, right? So there, a lot of colleges take the approach that we just want to eliminate as many people as possible. So you're supposed to answer 200 questions in 100 minutes. So that is the approach a lot of Indian exams take. But there are also some good institutions that are looking for more nuance, right? So then there are uh, colleges like Ashoka University. This used to be a good place, but now TIS is experiencing the same thing that Air India experienced. So let's see what happens at TIS. And then there are
You said
also good,
this, right? Tata Institute of Social
yeah,
Sciences, no? Oh,
yeah,
then that changed now. Yeah, it's sad.
yeah. The
It
management has
was,
changed. The management has changed, and
uh,
now they are trying to take a more MBA college approach. Right? So the MBA college approach is like, oh, we are going to give students targets. We are going to make them do internships. There needs to be something productive at the end of the day. But with a social science college, you're not going to have something productive at the end of the day in the same way that you have for a tech-based college, right? You're not going to have something productive in the same way that you have for a management, right? They're not going to be organizing and doing something. They're going to be asking questions, and if there is one thing that we know the current establishment does not like is questions. And then we get foreign reporters who are on Indian news channels grilled about their questions. Anyway, that's a big conversation. That would be a completely different can of worms that I'm sure none of us want to open. But yeah, asking questions is what social science students do. And asking questions is also what a psychologist is going to do. Right? How does that make you feel? Why do you feel that about this particular person? Why do you feel that about this particular situation? And it is in answering the question that we end up with a solution, right? So asking questions is something that we have to do. And sometimes we can do it gently in a therapy setup, right? And sometimes we have to ask the tough questions that involve ripping off the band-aid, right? And it entirely depends on what is the situation you're dealing with. It entirely depends on the personality and mindset of the person you're dealing with, right? And that kind of communication skill is something you only build with experience, right? It is not something that you can figure out just by reading a book. It is not something you can figure out just by passing an exam. It is not something that you can figure out through one single internship. Internship helps, right? We have internships for psychologists as well as psychiatrists. Even medical doctors will tell you that, oh, I know how to diagnose a disease, but I still needed to learn how to get the symptoms from the patient, right? Your doctor needs to be asking you the right questions in order to figure out what your symptoms are, right? That is something that a psychologist needs to do. That is something that a doctor needs to do. That is something a psychiatrist also needs to do. So that kind of questioning is very important, because unless you ask questions, you're not going to figure out what the problem you're facing is in the first place, right? And that sort of critical thinking is sorely needed in today's day and age, especially on social media, right? So why am I seeing this reel? Why does the algorithm think this is a content I will like? Or is the algorithm just trying to keep me glued to my phone? Right? Now, thankfully, I generally get content I that appeals to me, right? I thankfully don't get content that is like traumatizing. I know a lot of people who get traumatizing content, but then I also ask them, what did you do when you came across that reel? What did you do when you came across that triggering post? Did you like it? Did you go in the comment section and argue with a troll about it? Did you forward it to somebody like, oh my God, look at what these people are saying? Or did you practice did you prioritize your own mental health and went, okay, this is an opinion, scroll on, right? Because I get it. I'm telling you to engage with people, I'm telling you to connect with people. But there are also times when you need to prioritize your own mental health, right? And it is on a case by case basis. Is this something that I feel I can help with? Is this something that I feel I cannot help with? Is this a person who I care about enough to reach out to them and say this? Or is this a person who I don't care what happens to? Right? And that last question is very important. Do I care whether this person lives or dies? Do I care if this person ends up in the manosphere and becomes whatever it is that they become? Is this something that I care about? And that is going to be a very difficult question for a lot of people to answer because we like to think about ourselves as good people. We like to think about ourselves as people who care about our friends, people who care about our families. But how much do we care? Do we care enough to maybe point it out to somebody else, right? Oh, hey, this is something that I saw on your daughter's story, or this is something that I saw on your sister's story. Would you talk to her about it? I am worried, right? Or do you think this is something that she is going through, right? If you don't feel confident enough to reach out to them on your own, if you don't feel you can have that conversation, you can involve other people. You don't have to be the person who does everything, right? You can point it out to a friend, you can point it out to a family member, you can reach out to their best friend and like, hey, this is something I saw on XYZ story. You are their friend. I don't know them all that well, but it made me worried. Is this something that you are also worried about? Do you think this is something we should talk to them about? Right? And if they are actually their friend, you will get an answer. Right? Or they might just say, oh, नहीं इसका ये सब चालू रहता है and just a rant, ignore it. Because we will do rant, right? And they are still fine about it after ranting about it, right? So talk to people, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now going forward, if my HR will make any excuse, no, I'll question them that why we don't have organizational counselor, psychiatrist.
Hmm.
So definitely, I think there's a lot of things which needs to be in place. There are a lot of things which needs to be acknowledged, addressed at right time with the voicing with proper vocal expression. And this session has been something which is very insightful for all of us. Varad, I am really grateful that you gave your valuable time to us. And we will be posting this over the YouTube and we'll share the link with you. I also personally want to thank Akash, Aryan, Lakshita. All of them are doing exceptionally good work. I'm proud of all three students. They are really someone from whom I'm taking inspiration. So thank you, all three of you as well. And if you have any question to Varad, you can directly ask him. I'll just go on mute and then we'll wrap up this session. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So any
I have
questions?
no further questions.
Hmm?
Uh, I think sir answered everything beautifully. So yeah,
Okay, no questions. So then we can close the session here. Thank you all for organizing this. Right? I'm sure it must have been a lot on your end as well. Great job for organizing and for taking the time to listen to me. Right? And I hope you can use this somewhere in the future. Right? And as always, you have my number, you have my contact details. You can reach out to me if you need anything. And yeah, that's all from my side. Do you have any feedback for me? Feedback, comments, anything?
It was nice talking to you.
It was nice talking to you. Okay. I see a lot more going on behind that smile, but okay, that is what we're going with. Okay. So,
it was really nice listening to you. Many of the questions that we had, like we didn't know any answer to. Many of the things that
mhm,
we felt like something was wrong, you really, you
mhm.
know, gave us the answer to that. So I'm really thankful that you were with us today. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, and feel free to reach out to me anytime if you ever need any help. And I think we can stop here for the day then. Hello then. Bye bye.
Bye, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye,
Thank
sir.
you,
Thank
sir.
you.